always happy to have it. But the good news is we should be able to get to a lot of your questions, which is helpful as well. First off, thank you so much for being here tonight and taking time out of your busy lives. And I would be remiss if I also didn't acknowledge some other people to say thank you to start tonight with. First of all, starting with our committee, the PASE Committee has 19 individuals that, believe it or not, I checked back, we are literally over 9 months worth of effort. So we started meeting 9 months ago, gathering information, holding information sessions. This is the 3rd open house that we've held. And we continue to have community outreach so that everybody can be as informed and as educated about our current circumstances as possible as we enter the May 19th vote. I also want to extend a very big thank you to our town and school leadership, employees. They have done a great job, whether it's preparing facilities like tonight for us to be here, gathering information, being available for all of the open houses and the meetings that we held. They've just been an incredible asset to our community and certainly to the PASE Committee as well. So a lot of thank you to their department leadership, whether it was the police, the fire, the DPW, school leadership. So many people have come together to give all of you the most information that we could possibly provide so you can, again, be informed and educated. So with that, a little bit about the PASE Committee. The PASE Committee, like I mentioned, was formed about 9 months ago. We are an incredibly diverse group. We are resident-led. We were created at last year's budget town meeting as a result of the budget challenges that we knew. There are 19 individuals. Hopefully it changed, good. 19 individuals that all come from different walks of life. There are financial professionals, there are public safety professionals, town and school leadership, there are teachers, there's just a tremendous amount, and just straight up residents. So a lot of people came together. I can tell you that the diversity of the group is incredible. There was some very intense debates, discussions, and the fact that we came to nearly unanimous alignment around the challenges that we face is pretty impressive, and I think it just speaks to the validity of the data that we have and how we looked at it. What we were tasked to do, we have a charge that we have to do, and that is to compare ourselves to other communities. So for those of you that have been wondering why do we always compare ourselves to others and not just look at ourselves, it's because we had to. It was literally the charge that the residents voted for last year. And what we did was we looked at different community groupings. You'll hear groupings like DART, which is the Department of Education's a comparable community set for Easton. So they tell us who they would compare us against. You'll see we often compare against neighboring towns and communities as we know them well, and that's a good comparison for us as well. And so we really focused on answering some key questions. What is driving our budget challenges? Are we fundamentally spending too much? Have we too many expenses? Can we be more efficient and thrifty? Do we not have the same revenue structure that other communities have? You'll see that that's the largest piece. And specifically, we are tasked with coming back to May town meeting, coming up on May 19th, with what our recommendation is. So tonight is just an open house to share information, to share findings, hopefully to get your engagement, and certainly hopefully to ask you to go back out to all of your friends, your neighbors, and your community, and to share what you've learned tonight and create curiosity. I think that's the biggest thing that we're trying to ensure we instill, that this isn't about judgment, that this is about trying to create curiosity about challenges that we in our community face together. And we welcome that. So we welcome your questions. The last thing I would just impress upon everybody is that any budget for anybody that has had to do them or has a house budget or tries to figure out how much money they have or how much they spend, it truly reflects your values. And our budget in our town reflects our community's values. We as residents vote for our budget every year. Whether or not we all vote to support or vote against, at the end of the day, whatever is voted on by residents reflects over time our values. Whether we love things like open space or historical preservation, whether we support our schools, our police, or our fire. How we spend our money reflects all of the actions and the activities that happen in our town, whether it's a police officer stopping to help somebody across the street, whether it's a school teacher spending time after school to help our kids, and everything in between. All of those monies, dollars, and cents add up to human interaction that impacts our community and truly reflects our values at the end of the day. So I would just ask that you keep that in mind as we go through today's presentation. I'm almost about to get in trouble because I didn't introduce myself first, and I was specifically reminded to do that. My name's Tom Broussard, for those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet yet. I've been in Easton since 2007. I think I'm supposed to know that faster. My wife would be yelling at me right now. But I've been here for quite a while. I have two beautiful daughters that have grown up, are growing up and going through the Easton school system, and I've been involved in our community in a variety of ways, and I certainly care passionately about it. So, what's going on in Massachusetts? First of all, this is decidedly not an Easton problem. If anybody comes up and is talking to you about why is it just Easton, please point them in a couple directions. First of all, there's Boston Globe articles back in July that talk about the challenges that so many communities and towns are facing. So it's public, it's out there. The challenge that we are facing collectively is that fundamental, I'll call them fixed costs, but insurance costs and other fixed costs that are associated that you can't get away from when you're running a business or a community, are growing at astronomical rates. Inflation, I think we all can relate, is growing at rates far beyond what our revenue capability is to grow. The other thing that's going on is we are naturally having an expiration of a tremendous amount of federal fund infusion. COVID introduced a lot of money into communities and towns, and those funds are going away. Not that we relied upon them. I think you'll find Easton is incredibly disciplined about using one-time funds, that we don't use them for ongoing expenses. That is never a good thing to do. We have been very thoughtful about how we use funds and how we keep our operating expenses, as you'll see, incredibly efficient. From FY14 to FY23 across the state, 287 overrides were sought by the statewide. And what an override is, that's Prop 2.5, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on as well. But just so that I can get a show of hands, because there's only a few of us, how many people are familiar with Proposition 2.5 means in Massachusetts? Okay, so enough which is good, and if I don't cover all the points, share with your neighbor. But let me just give you an understanding of how property tax in Massachusetts, not just Easton, works. So back in roughly 1982, the state put forth a law that says cities and towns can only increase their tax base by 2.5%. That's the law. Doesn't matter if your expenses or your insurance or your utilities or your Comcast bill goes up by 10 or 20%. You can only increase, without asking for an operational override, by 2.5%. And Easton has gone an incredibly long time without asking for an operational override, which means all of these years, our ability to raise revenue is 2.5% on our residential base. Unsurprisingly, I think you all know, we are a heavily residential forward community. That's what Easton is. And we'll get into more detail about that. But we're not alone. In times of inflation, communities, especially like ours, are incredibly susceptible to increased costs when your revenue can't go up. And that's why, on average, in FY24, we had 62 attempts just in that 1 year alone. And remember, the preceding 10 years was 287. In FY25, there are 46 attempts already. We are not alone. So the rest of the state is navigating this. Among the 10 Massachusetts towns that have the most similar tax profile, i.e. heavily residential, similar residential commercial split, similar population, total tax revenue, we have gone the second longest, 19 years, without an operational override. And it's the longest we as a town have ever gone since the Prop 2.5 has been instituted. That's incredibly meaningful. It means that for all this period of time, we have listened to our voters, and we have run incredibly efficiently. Yankee thrift has nothing on us, just to be blunt. I'd like to give you another point to chew on as to what also is going on in Massachusetts and what uniquely impacts Easton, and that's the box to the right. It's called Chapter 70 State Funding. This is really important. So our schools, appropriately so, our community values our school spend disproportionately in a good way. We support it. It's 50% of our operational expense. And we care passionately and have supported so many projects. We have done that while effectively the state has told us to solve supporting that on your own. And let me give you some context. So the Chapter 70 funding, again, is a state mandate. You can't get around it. And there's a couple things that hurt us in that particular formula, they call it, which I think it takes a physics degree to actually get it all right. So I'm sure I'll get something wrong, so correct me. Some of the important things are that we are a minimum aid district. What that means is we get roughly every year an increase of $30 per student. Last year it was a little bit more. Thank God they heard us. It was $100. But I need you to understand that that $30 is paltry. That is a $100,000 increase or 0.2% increase on the budget. It doesn't help us. Now, when this all started, when Chapter 70 first came out, Easton was a minimum aid district. There were others with us. However, the reason why this is now we're not alone problem, and we have been advocating to change it, trust me, the reason we're not alone is the disproportionate number of communities now are all minimum aid. So we have 350 cities and towns in Massachusetts. Roughly 36 are not minimum aid. That means 320 other communities have now joined Easton along the journey. We used to be a very small minority, and they are now feeling the pain just like we have this entire time. So other communities will be getting a much larger allocation from the state for their funding. That's the state telling you as residents, us as leaders, you have to figure it out yourself, and we've given you a solution, just execute an operational override. And that was stated back in 1982 when Prop 2.5 was formed, and it's been true every year since. The state will always say, we gave you an ability to solve your own problem. Here's another example of how, unfortunately, Easton falls in the wrong bucket. If you happen to be in Foxborough or Mansfield, you have as a wage adjustment factor for your teachers. And what they've recognized is that in those communities, they should get more support from the state because it costs more to hire teachers in Foxborough and Mansfield. And I think it's the range is from a factor of 1, so you take whatever you're getting and multiply it by 1, all the way up to 1.1267, if I remember correctly. We are 1. We get no benefit because we are Easton, and we fall in what's known as the Brockton-Bridgewater District. If that alone was changed and we fell into the teacher bucket, that would be millions of dollars? Millions of dollars. We have never fallen in that district, and we have advocated year after year to fall in that district. The last thing is Prop 70. Chapter 70 has an inherent flaw to it, and that is that there is a cap of 4.5% for an increase. That's a challenge when your inflationary pressures exceed 4.5%. So that's enough in the detail of Chapter 70, Prop 2.5. There'll be time for questions after. Please come up and ask us. But what we're saying is that we are not alone, and Easton has borne the burden of being challenged in these particular ways for a long period of time. And we've made do, we've always done more with less, candidly. Next up, just want to give you the high-hard ones of all the research that we did. When I say we had meetings, they were 5-hour marathons. You can look them up online. They are pretty long, lengthy, and a great way to fall asleep if you're trying to catch a snooze. But there was an awful lot of effort, so I don't mean to minimize that. What we found, essentially, is that we're in a perfect storm. That continued weak support from the state via general aid or school aid has weighed down for us for too long and for too many years. State aid is our second largest revenue bucket at 14%. One of the largest buckets of that is what's called unrestricted general government aid. I am sorry to tell you that in 2008, the state cut our unrestricted general government aid so much that we are still just getting back to what those real dollars were, let alone inflation adjusted, all of these years later. So we have heard the community and the residents speak for many years now, and literally have done so many things to minimize expenses and to drive revenue growth. Last year was our largest new growth year ever, which is great. But it's just not enough to overcome this perfect storm. The other thing, And I just ask you all to reflect on this and own it as I learned the message and had to own it as a resident. We have what we asked for. Over the years, Easton has been a spot that appreciates green space and recreation. And as a result, through all of the years, going back decades, we have preserved and or made non-taxable nearly 1/3 of our entire town. That is an incredibly large portion of your real estate, especially when you are a residential forward community. We are what we created. And what that means is, if your largest revenue base is driven by property taxes in single family homes, and you can only increase them by 2.5% each year, it's very difficult for you to, in inflationary times, cover the costs. So you can see how that can be a very difficult aspect for us. I wouldn't change it for the world, by the way. I think we all moved to Easton for exactly the values and qualities that make it inimitable. We are literally unique in who we are, and people love it for us. They love moving here. Our property values have taken off. I wouldn't change it for the world. It's just an understanding of how we happened to get here. Lastly, we are rolling off COVID-related relief programs. For a lot of towns and communities who perhaps were not as thoughtful with their expenses and revenues and COVID funds, they had a difficult last year. I think you heard all the dialogue about the cuts, the programs, the overrides. Again, it started in 2024. We were able to navigate that. We were able to make it an additional year, but regrettably, expenses that are beyond our control, like health insurance, literally continue to increase in a 7-figure way each year, year after year. And that gets to the expense challenges. Our cost inflation is so much more than the 2.5%, and it is not caused by overspending. I can walk everybody through pretty much every dollar we have spent the last 3 years and explain to you that our educators do more with less, our town does more with less. We are fundamentally staffed, and we are spending less than surrounding towns, communities, comparable sets, school DART sets, town sets, whatever you want to do. We looked at it for a long period of time. Health insurance costs, as I spoke about, went up $1 million in FY25. They're going up another $1 million plus in FY26 now. We have pensions, property insurances, and regional school assessments that combined represent $3.5 million of total cost increases in the last 2 years alone. So that's not more people. That's not doing more things. That's literally putting the key in the door and doing the same things we've been doing the last 2 years. And it's $3.6 million worth of increased expense. We are well below the state average, whether it's town spend or school spend, and we have fewer staff across the board. And just in case folks are thinking that this just happened, in 2016, there was a request for an operational override that the residents voted down. We did an operational audit. We literally went external and said, look at us and compare us to other towns. And they came back and said, you have less expense per department and you have less people. It's just them. In 2020, the budget subcommittee of our own town validated that information yet again by looking at very similar data that the PASE Committee just confirmed here in 2024 and 2025. We literally spend so much less per resident or per pupil. It's just a fact. We're pretty thrifty. And for the record, we have all said that that's okay. We're okay being efficient and thrifty. Our high school was 35th in the state in terms of status out of 351. And when you see how much they get of spend per pupil, honestly, I'm so appreciative for what all of our town employees and school employees do for us, candidly. So with that, I would welcome to the microphone Vice Chair Nancy Donahue. She will probably talk a lot longer than I did, so I'm sorry, Nancy, to throw you under the bus already. But she has so much great information to share with you, and honestly, the committee is so much better for having Nancy as Vice Chair.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for coming this evening. We really appreciate your participation and your engagement here. My name is Nancy Donahue, and I have been in Easton for 30 years. I just completed a 20-year career teaching science at Oliver Ames High School. What an amazing place to work. It's been a pleasure to be part of that group. and I'll talk in detail about some of the school issues that I'd like to tell you about in a few minutes. But I want to start by talking about, I've also been on the Ames Free Library Board for 12 years, so just a person who loves this town, and I'm so happy that you're here. I want to talk at a summary level of some of these revenue issues that Tom mentioned, as you see here. These are our revenue sources, and you can see that taxation contributes to about 3/4 of our revenue. And because we are a residential forward community, that the overwhelming amount of that is from individual residents, like 90%, as compared to commercial activity. And as Tom said, we so value our green space in town, but whenever we have these open house presentations, at our first one at Queeset House, we asked people what they valued in town, and of course that came up as a primary thing. And then we asked what are some things that are challenging Easton that we could do better, and people said the same thing: difficult to build, difficult to develop in that green space. And it's not that one is right or one is wrong, but as Tom said, it's reflective of our values and just something that we need to understand. We did better with growth in town last year, I think primarily due to some of the infrastructure improvements like sewer systems that we put in place. But still, when growth opportunities come up, they are a challenge at places like Town Meeting. Avalon is our largest taxpayer, yet there's always controversy over multi-dwelling units. So just something that we have to think about as residents. The other thing I'd like to focus on is the fact that the state aid, as Tom mentioned. Right now we're seeing it at 14% or so, and as Tom mentioned, we were at 25% back in 2008. So it is a huge gap between what the state is willing to give Easton, as Tom said, just expecting us to be able to solve these problems. And then we have small amounts in these other categories. I want to focus a little bit on the school operating spend, and you'll see this theme come up both on the school side and the town side. On the school side, people make up 85% or 85 cents on every dollar of spend. So when we have a reduction on the school costs, those reductions, of course, impact personnel and the services and programming that go with those folks. And I'm going to talk about that detail and what the school department, the school leadership at the school level and administration and the school committee has had to deal with this year. They have had a very, very difficult time trying to balance this budget. You'll see the next categories of spend are largely impossible to control. For example, SPED, which stands for Special Education, includes the programming and includes students who are outsourced, sometimes to residential opportunities, because we don't have the right place or experience here for them in Easton. Those costs can be $200,000 and $300,000 a student for a residential setting. There's also transportation associated with that. A student may have to be driven many, many communities away for this experience, as well as our regular transportation, getting students to school. And it seems impossible to renegotiate those costs because when we do put our contracts out to bid, there don't seem to be any bidders out there. And I understand that's true for all communities, Dr. Cabral. So almost impossible to control those costs. As Tom said, comparison was a huge charge of the PASE Committee. And I'm not seeing this. 2023 update on this slide. I didn't make this slide. So in 2022, you can see we are not faring well compared to all of our neighboring districts. And the DART community that Tom mentioned, that stands for the District Analysis and Review Tool. It's a DESI tool that we use for a host of things like comparing MCAS scores, how our students are performing, and it looks at a lot of factors to put communities in our comparison in our neighborhood. We also looked at neighboring communities. We just sliced and diced this so many ways. And you can see the information that we worked with most of the year was DESI's 2022 information. And there is only one town lower than us in our neighbors, in that category. And if we were to spend just up to our next neighbor, we would have to add another $5.6 million, and up to the state average would be another $10 million. Now, the data has come in for 2023 from DESE, and we are still second to last in per pupil spend. We're the Easton Public Schools to spend at the rate of our nearest neighbor, which is Stoughton. In that year, our per pupil rate would need to increase by $8.8 million. So we're talking about enormous amounts of money just to meet a neighbor or to meet an average. And I just want to emphasize, as Tom says, you know, we do so much more with less here. And I'll talk a little bit about the detail of my experiences in these schools in a moment. Here's the slide that also has the update where you can see where we are at 2023. New DART data showing that Easton continues to fall further behind, and we are now second to last even among the DART towns. And DART comparisons change a little bit year to year based on the makeup, such as special education students, EL students, students at risk, and other types of measures that they use. The town operating spend has a similar story. 82%, or 82 cents on a dollar, is people costs. So again, when you talk about having to reduce costs, you are looking at reducing people and the services and programs, again, that they represent. And finally, just similar to schools, the fixed costs are things that are extremely difficult, if not impossible to control. Or, I'll just make one little plug in the note of the library, something that we are so fortunate to have, the town not even incurring half of the cost of library operations due to the numerous Ames endowments that supports the rest of that. So we're very, very lucky in this town to have an award-winning library that the voters do not have to support with taxation at a full rate, at not even 50%. Repairs and maintenance continue to be a big part of those fixed costs. Utilities, our participation in SEMREC, snow and ice removal, and then they get smaller and smaller. So you can see, after personnel, these costs are really something that can't be controlled in an easy manner. How do we compare on the town side? Well, we run even leaner, which is hard to believe, than on the school side. We're Easton to spend at the nearest peer, which is Chelmsford. Our per resident rate, we would need to increase the total budget by $9 million. And if we were to spend at the resident rate of our neighbors, it would increase by $12 million. So enormous differences. It's not like we're just slightly less. These are large differences that make a huge difference in the way our people work in this town, our staff rising to these challenges of having less money. I really appreciate Dr. Krall allowing me to speak about the school side just in continuity of my being up here, but also that I could share some personal anecdotes, not only as a teacher, but also as a parent in town. I raised two daughters here in Easton, and they are graduates of Olive Ames High School, and they're both educators now. And I think that is largely because of the role models that they had in Easton and the wonderful teachers, music directors, all the things they were involved in these schools. So I'm happy with my 20-year experience to share some of those things. OA is an incredible place to work. The faculty and staff are excellent. The town support our buildings, top-notch. And the relationships that educators have with students is incredible. I often sub 3 days a week, and people laugh to say, you know, I thought you retired. What are you doing back here? It's a hard place to leave. It's a really good place to work. And it's been a very difficult year for educators, many of them, and including myself, the first time ever seeing a reduction in force that they're experiencing with next year's budget. And I include myself in that even as a retired person, because I was in here the day that many of those notices were given at the high school, and it was like a funeral. It was really tough. The difficult decisions that have been made by school level, administration, leadership, and the school committee has been incredible. I can't imagine sitting in their seat having to make those decisions. So in each of these position summaries that you can see, the reductions in teachers, nurses, art, music, PE specialists, literacy, learning specialists, paraprofessionals, psychologists, and support staff. You can see all of those details that were presented on the school budget hearing. Each one of those, someone could tell an impactful story or an anecdote about how losing a person or people in that position would be incredible. And I just want to highlight 3. The first one I want to talk about is the fact that with less hands on board, whether that be from nurses to teachers, who have more work to educate and manage the health and safety and well-being of our students, what that means is we have more challenge to build a relationship with students that allows us to assess students not only academically, but other kinds of areas that supports their well-being. And I think all of us know that those relationships that we've built in the past with good teachers is equally, if not more important than the academics themselves. And Oliver Ames does that at every level, from our building administrators through all of these categories of folks having an opportunity to work with these students. And secondly, I want to talk about a personal story in regard to the areas of art, music, and PE. And again, just some examples. One of my daughters, entering her senior year of high school, suffered from severe anxiety. And I heard, I don't think I want to go back. I said, well, that's not an option. You have to go back. You have to finish your senior year. She was very involved in the music program here, so I just used this as an example. It could be any of these other things. And the care and compassion and leadership of the folks in the music program, the rigor and the creativity of those performing groups, she had an incredible year. She actually went to Berklee College of Music and is now a music educator, sharing a lot of these things that she learned from people here about what are the ways to interact properly and engage all students. So I am ever thankful for that. There are so many students in this category. They were not here for my physics class. I recognize that. But they have an incentive to attend school because of some of these other things that they love. And we do a great job in Easton Public Schools offering these things. And I hope we can continue to do so. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the fact that I also pride Easton education in the fact that we give every child something. Every child has an opportunity to reach their potential here. Whether that be the foundational skills that they might need, literacy programs, mathematics tutoring, or some of the high-level advanced placement classes that gets them into these Ivy League colleges, everyone learns something. That's every teacher's goal here. There's nothing more frustrating for a teacher. It's not about the hours of work or preparing lessons or grading. It's about not having the time that you need to build that relationship with every student. And I can tell you the administration here demands that, requests that, knows that's important. So tries as best they can to support us with that. And so that's what we'd like to be able to continue to do, to make sure that there's the time with enough hands on deck that all of those things happen. So I'd like to now turn this over to, I guess we're going next to Fire, to Chief Alexander, who I'm hoping can share some anecdotes similar to what I do.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming tonight as well. So tonight we're talking a little bit about the fire department and the impacts of what's been going on currently and the future. So for some quick background on the fire department, if you don't know how we operate in fours. We have 4 shifts of firefighters that rotate through all the days, 24 hours a day, to staff the town and take care of our 3 fire stations. What that means is that on paper, we have 11 firefighters. We don't have that today, and we'll talk about that quickly. But we have 11 firefighters on each one of those groups. And when people take a day off, or a vacation, or a holiday, or they're out sick, we would lower the shift from 11 to 10 to 9 to 8. And that doesn't cost overtime because we just don't backfill those positions. So when we drop to 8, which just happens a lot because people have time off, we're at 8 most of the time. So we use that 8 as a standard of understanding of what is we really protecting you with. We're protecting you with 8 as our minimum all the time. Sometimes we luck out and we'll have 9 or 10 working, but not often. So when we look back at what does that 8 really mean to all of you, that means we've been at that 8 minimum since 2012. We haven't increased that minimum since then. So we're protecting you with the same amount of firefighters going out the door as we did in 2012, but yet our ambulance is 108% busier. It is more than doubled in that same time. That has a lot of impact, especially on our Bay Road fire station, because once upon a time that ambulance wasn't out as much, meaning that the firefighters, only two firefighters that were there, were available to respond to a fire call or a car accident, and they weren't at the hospital. But they're there all the time at the hospital, which means we have trouble staffing the Bay Road fire station to have a reliable fire engine that can provide fire, medical aid, hazardous materials, all these things. They're just not there a lot because they're at the hospital. So when you combined the fact that we're running that 8 and we're running more run volume than we've ever had before we even talk about budget cuts, we're already stretched. Our mutual aid has been ticking up even before any budget cuts, meaning that we're using Stoughton and West Bridgewater and Mansfield more and more, showing that we're being strained. So before we talk about budget cuts, we really needed help, more minimum staffing, a higher level 9 a shift, maybe 12 a shift. These are the things we could use now before we talk about budget cuts, right? So we're back there again. So what happened? So now let's talk about today before we talk about tomorrow. Today we've had the situation where, as you all here tonight have heard about these budget cuts, so have our firefighters. So prior to this, our shift staffing was 11 and we had space to hire people. We had to hire people to come here to fill those positions, and we were very marketable. Thanks to all of you, we had new buildings coming. We had our truck fleet improving. The shift staffing was a reasonable level. We had improved the minimum staffing, but the upper end was okay. And we were marketable, and people would come here. And we took a lot of transfers. People would come from other departments with 5, 10 years of experience. They would come here. They wanted to be here. And what ended up happening was when these same people came in, they ended up seeing the budget stuff that's starting to happen. They realized they had young families and they were worried about job security. And they left. They had to go because they were worried, will they have a job tomorrow? And we lay off people by who's the most junior person. So when the most junior person left, the next junior person was worried and they left. And it snowballs. So when you take those into account, we end up with that we're actually starting the year according to what we needed to cut if the override did not pass. We needed to have 2 positions not filled and about half of our training budget cut to take care of our portion of the cut to make the balanced budget. We're actually going to be down 9, which is a little over 20% of our staff on the line, which is the equivalent of like a 4-leg table losing an entire leg. That's how we're operating now before we even decide on the override. So we're struggling. What does it mean? Well, after the override, with the override passing, we would end up rebuilding our department. It's a good problem to have. And we would come right back. I know we can market ourselves. It's a great community. People would want to come here. If it doesn't pass, it's going to be a real problem because on top of the cut we have coming up, there'd be an additional $3 million the town has to cut. And I'm not too sure how we would deal with that, where we're at already before we even have the first cut. So I wanted to share these things and these considerations that we have because we're struggling. And we're going to have to do some station shuffling around how we staff our stations. You're going to see that coming. There's going to be some stuff coming out on social media that we're actually going to shift our firefighters because we're so limited in our staff and considerations to our Depot Street and Bay Road fire stations. Well, that's where we're going to run our firefighters out of coming up to try to provide the best coverage we can for both north and south of town, South Easton, because right now we're struggling to provide that coverage for both sides. So you're going to see a shift. We're still going to be there for you. We're still going to get out the door. We're going to make sure someone comes and help you, but we're going to have to do it different. Try to stem the tide of what's going on and what we have to do to make sure we can answer the call for you. So we're going to be there. I appreciate you all hearing me tonight about what we're doing, where we've been, where we're at today, and where we want to go tomorrow. So thank you.
And Chief Boone, please, for police.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Keith Boone. I'm your police chief, and this is a great town, so I have no doubt, regardless of what happens with the override vote, we will get good people to come back here. I know we will. I've seen this over the last 20 years. I've seen peaks and valleys, I was talking to Nancy DeLuca. Where is she? Congratulations again, where she is. We were talking about this. We've seen these things happen, unfortunately. I've seen 2 officers get laid off in the police department. Fortunately, we were able to bring them back. A lot of times they don't come back, but I know we're going to get good people to come back here. So a little bit of the police department, of where we are today, and we have a snapshot here on the slide behind me of just a snapshot of some of the calls for service. And we use 2014 as a data reference. One, it's 10 years ago, to see where we were with that staffing model we had, which was 36 officers back in 2014, and where we are today. So you see the numbers here, all but one have gone up exponentially. And we have 38 police officers today. It's actually one less than we had 2 years ago. So we were finally able to increase staffing to 39 police officers, which is still 7 less than the average. If you look at our comparables, we're far behind already. So the average, just to get to the average, we would need 46 police officers. And we got to 39 for a very short amount of time when I took over as chief. Following retirement, we had to eliminate that position to balance the budget. So for the police department, we're already in year 2 of this. So we've already seen this in the police department. So fast forward to today, where are we? We're at 38 police officers, and we have a detective sergeant retiring in 2 months from now. So when we put the budget together, we needed to cut approximately $200,000, and we eliminated his position first. Next, we eliminated $40,000 from our overtime budget and some very thin expense lines already in community events and some consulting services to get to that $200,000 number. And so how do we navigate with 37 police officers, which is really 36 because we do have an officer deployed in the military right now. So on July 1st, we're having 36 police officers show up for work, including myself, top to bottom. And having a reduction in overtime, how do we make it work? We just can't cut $40,000 and say we're going to pray for the best and hope will come in bottom line. It's not going to work that way. So what I've decided to do for the best operation of the police department and for the best of the town is we're going to bolster our patrol staff. So these calls for services is the priority. The officers on the road are coming to help you. Don't think they're not. But that means our detective division is going to suffer. So I'm not going to reassign a detective following the retirement. So we're going to drop to 3 detectives, which they also handle our court responsibilities as well. So it's really about 2.5 detectives, which I can tell you it's a disservice to those detectives. For a town, we're busy, but for a town with 26,000 residents, we're a busy police department. And to have all of these investigations fall on 3 people is really, I'm doing them a disservice. They're great people, so that's what's getting it done. The other thing we're going to do is we have a community outreach program that's benefited a lot of people in this town already. I can tell you that. There's people here I already talked to in the hall and had some good thank you for the stories you shared with me about some family members we helped. But I'm going to have to change how we do that. So right now we do a lot of proactive follow-ups for people that the police department tonight deals with someone that's in crisis. We'll send a team out tomorrow, Friday, Saturday to try to have some outreach and try to get them different services so they're not calling 911 next week when they're in crisis again. So we're going to reshape how that works. Right now we try to do 3 days a week at a minimum for follow-up. We may have to eliminate proactive follow-ups and just come to a co-response model. Again, a lot of this is dependent on overtime, so I really have to reevaluate quarterly and see how this looks, which is really disappointing to me because it's something we worked very hard to do. The town, the people here supported hiring a mental health clinician several years ago, something that you're starting to see a lot of towns around us copying that model because we wrote the policy and did the blueprint, and I've shared it with all these other police chiefs, so I know it's working, and it's working in other towns in this county. So it is a disappointment for that, but we'll make it work. We will. And lastly, where else are we trying to save? Our overnight shift. So again, $40,000 is a lot of money. for our overtime budget to be cut. So we're going to reduce staffing on our overnight shift. I don't want to do it, but we are 94% people. That's our budget. There's nowhere to cut in the police department except for bodies. There's nowhere else to cut from. So I'm going to reduce the staffing on that shift, and what's going to help us is the replacement cost. You heard Chief Alexander talk about when people are out of work, we have to have people show up to work. We just can't say, no, run with one officer. We have to have a minimum certain amount of officers on shift. So I'm now going against everything I believe in because we haven't had one officer on the desk and 3 on the road since I was a patrol officer in 2011. So we're now 14 years later going backwards to when I was a patrol officer. So that's disappointing, but that's the only way we can look to find savings to address the budget. And so thank you for listening to me. Thank you for supporting us. You're here because you care, so that means a lot. And we'll be here for the next few hours if you have any questions. I've already talked to a few of you, but come find me. Thank you.
All of that hopefully gives you a base of information to understand how PASE arrived at its final recommendation, which is what our charge was. I do just want to emphasize a couple key points that I think you heard some emotion from the last few people that spoke about the services, the programs, and the people. And it really doesn't scratch the full surface. It really impacts our leadership when they are realizing that things like Touch a Truck or things like community engagement and the police cruiser being, I would call it Parkview, but Blanche James, for trick or treat. Like, those are things that create engagement in our community at very young ages or in meaningful ways that build strong bonds. Those are things not talked about today. They kept it, as we are, trying to be thoughtful about your time. But those are real. The town pool not being staffed or open is real. My kids are teenagers and I don't see them at all anyways, but they loved the town pool when we were coming here. That was something that was unique to Easton. I only use those as a few examples only on the town side of the little things that we're not telling you about that I believe are part of the fabric of Easton. The other thing on the school side, what we're not telling you about to some degree, are the little things you do when you identify challenges for children early that save you a tremendous amount of expense later. So as a community, we are losing the ability to engage early, therefore costing us more expenses later. I will speak firsthand about a personal story, and I can tell you that without the interactive reach out by the clinical staff of our police, my daughter would be suffering from a material amount of mental health and challenges that would have required us to call the police department more times than we had to. She's in a much better place, and that is in large part due to the team that the police and the town support from a mental health perspective. So I can tell you firsthand it's real, and I'm happy to share that with anybody that has their own story after the fact. But those little things don't get talked about, and those are the things to me that make Easton neighborly, make us a community, and make us who we are. As a result, you can see the logic. We didn't really have to go through a pretty complex algorithm to get you there. So we spend less money than our surrounding towns. But then we told you most of what we spend is people. So your next thought would be, maybe we have too many people. But then we showed you that we are dramatically understaffed when it looks from an expense perspective, from a police perspective. We showed you the challenges of the fire department perspective. And I can tell you that when you look at the number of educators per student ratio, we are very much near the bottom. So it isn't that we just spend too much money and it's all on people. It's literally we don't spend as much money as our peers. We don't staff with as many people as our peers. And amazingly, our community pulls together and we continue to outperform just as a neighborhood and as a town. That is why PACE realized our problem doesn't lie on the expense side. We're not spending too much money. The problem lies because of a perfect storm of what's been created on the revenue side. That we are a residential forward community governed by a 2.5% cap of increase, so to speak. And largely, we like new growth to be single-family homes. I know we say we want new growth, but I can tell you I listened in on the planning committee meeting when there was a discussion about putting in Taco Bell and a drive-through in Chipotle, and how many people showed up and said, lots of traffic, safety issue, don't want to drive through. And I'm not judging them. I'm just saying that Easton has routinely voted and supported being a residential forward community. And we love it for that. It comes with it in high inflationary periods, some very unique challenges that the state has fundamentally told us, yeah, we gave you a solution. You can solve it yourselves. Have at it. We're working really hard to discuss with the state ways they can help us, whether it's the Teachers Association, the MTA, whether it's our school leadership who has been at the State House steps multiple times. Residents have participated. Our town administrator is routinely called by cities and towns for his advice and guidance and sits on boards with our state. It is not because we're not trying. As a result, we have identified as a PASE committee that our average size of challenge, and this is 19 people, a democratic way, voicing what they believe the size of the challenge is, of 8.1 million. And the range was somewhere between 7 million and 9 million. Not wide, just from a statistics perspective. The revenue side was overwhelmingly where we netted, that we expect $7.3 million of solution of this challenge to come from an operational override, for all the reasons I just gave you before. The expense side, candidly, this is a nod that no matter how much of our challenge we're trying to solve operationally through an override, that we will continue to face the same challenges as time comes. We will be challenging our leadership, and as you'll learn later on, we are actually put forth a compact, a community compact, that the school committee, the select board, and the finance committee have all signed unanimously, governing how we will proceed financially for the next 4 to 5 years. It's going to be tough, again, in year 4 or 5, especially if your health insurance goes up 10 and 12%, 1 to 1.5 million every year, year after year. Hopefully it doesn't. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Here's why we are so appreciative that you're here, because the challenge isn't just as simple to say, absolutely, residents should pay more. It's fact, they absolutely should bear this burden. That's not true. From the context of that people say, do we pay a large amount of dollar taxes? And we do in Easton. If this was a very simple problem, we would have just really gave you the punchline right away and not spent all this time. But the residents of Easton spend roughly $8,652 in tax. It's the second highest amongst our neighboring communities. There's a reason for that. 1, we get most of our revenue from single-family homes. 2, Easton has a very good benefit for its homeowners. We have the second highest single-family home value. And obviously, if you buy a $1,000 TV and you pay 6.5% on it, like a sales tax, and that's different than if you have a $5,000 TV and pay 6.5% on that. What I'm getting at is our tax rate per $1,000 is actually relatively low, which is good. We have a high home value. Yes, we pay high tax dollars, but relatively as a ratio, we sit pretty much in the middle. The other good thing for Easton, on average, we all make more than our surrounding communities as well. So when you look at our tax bill as a percent of our income, it also puts us in a lower bracket. It doesn't change the reality. First of all, a lot of people say, I still own my home, I can't tap the value of it, so someday it will be good. That's a true point of view, and I absolutely appreciate that. So it's good that home values are high, but it's not liquid for you, so to speak. So this slide really just pays homage to that. There is no easy solution to the equation. That taxes relative, from a dollar perspective, are high. Only Sharon's is higher. But when you put it against the fact that we on average make more, that we on average have a higher value, not by a little, but by a lot. Personally, I'm happy to pay $400 more than Mansfield and have over $40,000 worth of home equity. That's good, but again, cash out each year can be difficult for people. We as a committee have tried to be incredibly thoughtful that no matter the solution that we pose, there will be people who have absolute names attached to them that will be impacted. We know the names of the people, the police, the fire, the school teachers that will potentially be reduced. We know those names. We know that there will be some people when they have an increase in taxes, and there are people every day in Easton where they literally are having difficulty affording to pay their taxes. It's the truth. So I just wanted to share this information because we have tried to be as balanced as we can on all sides of the issue to be fair, informative, and educational. How would that override be allocated? So we do have two budgets. One is the budget that by state law we have to balance. So if we don't get an override, we've identified all the reductions of expense so that we balance. It's a state law. If we get an override, we have built back, and I say we loosely, but the leadership of our town and schools have built back what they would do with it. First, they would not use our reserve funds as a revenue source. Again, there was a comment that Chief made. He said, we're going to have this problem if we don't get an override of about $3 million. He's right. Because in the budget, as it sits with all of these reductions, we are using our cash reserves, our savings account, to stave off close to $3 million plus of expense reductions, which means if we don't get an override this year or next year, you can't reuse that $3 million savings account. It's gone. So his firefighters know that if there's a reduction this year, and there's no override, there will be a reduction again next year. And it's not complicated to say it's schools have a large portion of expense, public safety, police and fire, and DPW. They're just the largest portions of our expense, and they're mostly people. That's why he's pointing out that this isn't a challenge just for this year if we don't get an override. We'll be back having the discussion next year under even more difficult circumstances. So again, we're being thoughtful financially to make sure that we don't use our savings account. We have grown our savings account, and I give credit to our town for doing that. We would be allocating close to $2.1 million back to our public schools, $727,000 back to town departments. We, as a community in a town, will be allocating $150,000 for increased tax abatements. And anybody that's on a fixed income, anybody that's in a neighborhood that has people on a fixed income or are low income, please go to the website on our town for taxation aid. Our community over the years has instituted a fund to provide tax relief for tax abatement for fixed income, low income veterans that people can leverage. So educate. I'm going to ask you all to do that. Please, your community, your friends, your neighbors. Last year, we did something where we had to go, and I'm going to butcher this, to the state to get approval for a novel way to utilize and support additional funding of these programs. Did I butcher that? Fair summary for a layman. We have, back in the day, always thought about how do we care for the people in our environment where it's dominated by single-family taxation so that they can participate in our community. We're trying not to leave anybody behind. And this speaks to that. It was important to the committee, and it was adopted by, I appreciate our town leadership, to continue to put funds in for tax abatement. So please ask about how you can help people who are impacted by this tax increase, who are having difficulty meeting obligations. Next up is restoring some benefits and insurance for $75,000. A recurring capital set aside. So again, we are using free cash. We are using reserves. We have difficulty funding capital projects as a result, like most other communities would use their free cash for. And it makes sense. And then the last thing, again, this problem is not going away. On the last slide, I'll get into it more, but our people, our town, our unions have given so much that we have to be thoughtful about what the future looks like, whether it's wage increases, whether it's insurance increases. And this last $800,000 is specifically earmarked in a stabilization fund for exactly those things. So we're trying to be demonstrative that we are not here to solve your problem this year as a PASE committee. We want to create a sustainable Easton, and what that looks like is roughly a 3 to 5 year time horizon that this override would support. And it will still challenge your leadership to be incredibly thoughtful, thrifty, and frugal, and to continue to do more with less. And so that's what we really tried to focus on with this override. And that's how you get to $7.3 million. The basis of the recommendations are on the right-hand side. It's the balanced non-override budget plus these add-backs. And you can see the additional tax impact. Again, we try to just give you information to create visibility. Monthly, on a median home value, it's about a $67 increase, $201 a quarter, or $803 annually. And on the average home value of $709,000, it's about $73 a month, $880 a year. And there's a tax calculator. Please go to easton.mass.us/override. Go to our PASE website. There is thousands of pages of document, links to all of our presentations, our meetings, our materials. It's just a tremendous amount of resources. This slide presentation, although it may feel lengthy in duration, is only 18 slides. There are 71 total slides. We've hidden the rest because we just don't have time to go through them, but we've given them in prior presentations, and we're always happy to talk. The community compact I alluded to, so essentially what this is a tool. This is our town making a commitment to our town. That's the way I look at it. If we are going to ask so much of our residents to give in terms of financial support, then we think it's appropriate that we ask the town leadership, select board, finance committee, school committee, who signed off on this unanimously, to make commitments back. Those commitments are largely 6 items. 1, no debt exclusion, so no big capital projects for at least 5 years, and no operational override for at least 4 years. I'm going to put a big asterisk on this, not in small print, but I just want to be upfront. If next year somebody in the state or federal government says you have to have 75 different water treatment facilities for every single gallon of water, then we will absolutely have to come back to the town to understand what that emergency state unfunded mandate means. Hopefully that makes sense. A wild exaggeration. But what it means is there are things beyond our control. Human disasters, natural disasters, so on and so forth, that could happen. And what it would take is a resident vote to be able to have these conversations. But the commitment is 5 and 4 years and overrides. We recognize that as much as we love our green space and recreation, we have to begin to assume and continue to put forth a pro-growth posture. We need to make sure that we are working to develop the industrial park and maximizing it. The good news is, after years of working, we were just able to get connected into the Brockton sewer. Years of working to get that to happen. That's very appealing for an industrial park. We want to work with the planning committee, we want to work with zoning, we want to understand what can we do to change our posture so that we are welcoming for growth, and not just residential would be my personal recommendation for everybody to begin to digest. I know a lot of people have an issue, as Nancy pointed out, with large construction projects like Avalon, and it's different than what Easton is accustomed to. But that is a very large, our largest taxpayer, who gave us $8 million of general mitigation funds that we were able to use over the last several years. That has been an incredible town partner. And no, per resident, they don't lead to more ambulance visits as compared to the rest of the single family homes. They just have more people there. So it's not a dramatic drain on resources. And I think if you noticed, Easton's not super small. We're bigger than Foxborough, bigger than Mansfield. 26,000 people is not little. So we have a lot going on. We've done a great job over the recent years, whether it's sewer districts, investments that you have supported, very appreciative, but there's a lot more, obviously, work to do. We always are working to minimize our impact on seniors, veterans, and individuals. As you can see, we allocated funds to do that. We continue to put forth budget efficiencies and annual caps. For example, beginning in 2027, the rolling 2-year average of increases for schools and towns' operating budgets can't exceed 4%. That's pretty tough. I just want you to know 4% is going to be hard for them to do. So there's hooks in this. We have to make sure we protect our financial reserves and shield our bond rating, so otherwise our debt costs go up. And there's measurement and accountability. So annual measurement of compact progress. Each year, the town and school departments will include in their budget proposal a narrative outlining, explaining how the proposed budget advances, meets or falls short of the goals of the compact and how we will solve it. So I encourage you all to attend those meetings to create accountability. Your presence does that. For the community compact, not a mic drop for record. Community Compact, I just want to give a quick shout out. Appreciate Jim Hamilton, Marissa, Nancy did just an incredible job putting forth this very large document. This is 6 bullet points. The document's multi-pages with a lot of detail, and the entire committee did a great job editing it down and supporting it. So thank you to the school committee, the select board, and the finance committee for unanimously supporting it. In closing, hopefully I've done a decent job threading in that we are all in this together, everyone. I'd like to just give you some examples. The PACE members come from very diverse walks of life. We debated each other, each from our own viewpoints. We got frustrated, angry, challenged by each other. And the reason is because we were solving a tough problem. This wasn't that people don't pay a lot of taxes and therefore that's what's going on. No, I mean, again, you can look at it in different ways, but our people do pay a meaningful amount. They work hard for what we have. And so I think, again, credit to the PACE Committee in general for really working hard to solve this and put forth this recommendation. Your town and school leadership are incredibly vested, they are engaged, and they are actively leading. They are trying to do the best they can with limited resources and making sure that none of us as residents feel the difficulty of less spend either per resident, per pupil, or forever how you want to do it. We really do more with less in our community. And I also want to highlight that our town and school employees and unions have given, will continue to give, and they share this burden. So it shouldn't be lost on us that it's not just leadership working hard, but so many town unions have taken 1-year contract increases. So many town unions are trying to compare themselves against other average salaries and trying to do the best they can by their union membership. The future retiree benefit that people pay, so people retire in Easton, right, and we support their benefits, we have increased the burden on those retirees for the amount of money they will have to pay, their percentage. Regrettably, that starts next year. Health insurance costs, we talked about that we have to pay more, but just like all of us as individual private residents and citizens, our town employees are paying more. Their costs are going up. Overtime, increased efforts with fewer people, quality of life is also impacted. That's a reality. And I guess on behalf of PACE, I think it's just important we all recognize, and I also ask residents to recognize, that our town employees are public safety, all of our departments are just giving, school departments are giving so much. And I have learned that through this journey, and I express my appreciation and ask you to do so as well. Town residents have and will continue to show up, so this is about you. The reality is, Easton for a long time, we have given. Whether it's just amazing volunteer programs, whether it's softball teams, everything in between, teachers staying late, coming early, taking a special interest, police officers caring, stopping by after hours, all sorts of things, and the examples just go on. We give so much. We have supported capital projects. That's hugely important. That matters to people, as Chief Alexander pointed out. I do want to say something about how much support we have given, though. I have heard, appropriately so, we do a lot of debt exclusion override projects, like the public safety, and they happen to come recently. But throughout time, we have done 7. The average of all of our surrounding communities is 7. That's just pure math. It's public on the MassDOR website. And as we pointed out, we've done 2 overrides, and we've gone the second longest out of all of our surrounding communities for operational overrides, 19 years. So yes, we are asking a lot from our residents. We appreciate you. And I personally couldn't think of a better place to invest my money. And I hope you all feel the same way. We have an incredible community. Lastly, we've done a lot of work. You've done work in showing up today, but we're going to ask you to do more work. So what can you do? 1, please just communicate, whether it's when you're taking trash barrels out and see a neighbor, if you have a neighborhood email chain, if you have groups that you participate in, you're a coach, or whatever it is, just share our information. Whether or not you take a position, just share and educate and provide information so people show up to town meeting on May 19th informed, and we would be incredibly grateful. Don't stop being curious. We have 14 days after this long 9-month journey before town meeting. May 19th, please go here.
And then June 10th is a ballot vote. So there's more to come. But please just educate, share. Thank you for showing up now. And I would just ask you to continue to show up in the days to come. I do want to pause. We have a Q&A session if people have questions. But I also just want to ask if anybody on the committee or the board wants to share any thoughts that I may have missed, because I am wont to do that at times. They're like, no, Tom, you used all your words, and ours too. Which is not uncommon, by the way. The joke about Nancy using all of extra time, it was really about me, so I apologize for that. Does anybody have questions that we can help with? Thoughts?
Yours. Do we want them to go to the mic, or just we're small enough they can stand up and...
If you can be loud, I think you can sit, and I'll repeat it.
It won't be heard on
It won't be heard in ECAT, so...
I'll
take the microphone and bring it around.
Oh,
Perfect.
Thank you. The mics are important for ECAT, so even though they can't hear what I'm saying right now.
I'm going to do what you do, Chief, and put a little timer up, but I'm so afraid of how far I'd go over. Right?
You didn't see my paper?
No, I didn't.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Lennon. I'm a relatively new resident to Easton. I've had family here for years. The question I have for the board is, are we looking at roughly, if our taxes are roughly $8,000, so we're looking at about a 9% increase in our annual property taxes in order to get us where we need to be? And in 2027, are we looking at an additional 9%? And that will continue year after year? It's not a one-time override.
Right.
That is correct.
So it becomes a permanent increase to the levy, and therefore, yes, you would be paying it in perpetuity. So it adds to your tax bill and stays, unlike debt overrides, which fall off.
Exactly. In that part I do get. Yeah. My question is, for 2026, we pay an additional 9%, 10% we'll say, just for easy math. We pay an additional 10%. Do we pay an additional 10% on top of that for fiscal year 2027?
So for an operating override, no. So it's an increase in that year that compounds in the future with your normal 2.5% growth, but it's not a 7.3% increase this year, and then next year it's 14.6, if that makes sense.
Right.
That does make sense.
Okay.
So it basically will stabilize to a certain degree.
Yes, but I would be misleading you if I said your taxes will stabilize them and stay totally static, right? I wish I could say that, but so it would go up by 7.3 million. The levy of roughly 9% is fair because the levy is about 70 million and change. And then future increases of the non-override allowance by the state of 2.5 will still occur. So you will have a higher baseline. And also, while some debt exclusions like Blanche James are already, and there's some confusion about this sometimes, that's already entirely in your tax bill today. So there's no shoe to drop there, so to speak, thankfully. There is still portions of the police, fire, and public works that will be coming online probably over the next 3 years as that's constructed. Unlike an operating override where that increases all at once, for a debt exclusion, it follows the issuance of bonds. And so the upside of that is it spreads those out much more gradually. The downside of that is that if you approve something in 2023, there's still adjustments coming in the future, which makes this conversation a lot harder.
But also we have some previous debt that is coming off.
That's fair, yes. So, and it goes both ways. So when a building is full, when bonds are paid off, like the building we're actually standing in now, OA and Easton Middle School, actually debt exclusion for that was approved 1 year before the last operating override, 05 and 06. Those bonds are being paid down. And so as the police, fire, public works debt comes online, there will be a relative net effect, a savings of these bonds going away. And that was deliberate, and we talked about that a lot with the community of sort of like timing a car payment with your spouse. But as this debt is paid off in full and the new project comes online, that softens the impact to an extent.
So as the debt is paid off on the schools, when the debt is paid off on the schools, we don't enjoy a real tax reduction. Is in the new budget, is the money that we would be enjoying as the savings with the schools being paid off figured into the budget as well, plus 9%.
So it doesn't work as in a way of kind of enjoying the savings into the budget, because debt exclusions are funded entirely out. They're shown on our income and expense, so to speak, but they're designed specifically so that whatever the annual dollar cost of those bonds are, that a commensurate amount of tax revenue is raised solely for that. So whether you're paying the debt off or you deliver a project under budget like Blanche Ames, the town, the public budget doesn't keep the net and can reallocate that out to serve the departmental needs. It's just not ever raised on your taxes, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dale Carrister. I just have two quick comments and one question. First, just wanted to thank you all, everybody on PACE, all of the committees, select board, finance, the department heads. I know how much you have all worked in order to provide accurate information to the community, so thank you very much for that. Secondly, I wanted to echo something that Nancy said. My family also had the benefit of receiving some extraordinary services from folks in the school department, especially in the high school, to get us through some challenges. These were dedicated and extraordinarily talented individuals. We never had to ask for anything. They were always 2 steps ahead of us. So thank you for that. My question is, with the understanding that the borrowings that we had for the district improvement financing program that was part of the Furnace Village sewer project, in order to bring some of those costs down, I understand we have to repay those amounts. Do you have any ballpark numbers in terms of what you're looking at for increase in tax revenue attributed to the 3 sewer projects, keeping in mind not only the infrastructure but also the zoning changes that the town has enacted, and, for example, increasing some of the density that was permitted in the Five Corners area and Avalon area, and not only what we may have seen already, but any projections going forward about how those things might impact the budget. Thank you.
This is awkward. Thank you, Dale. So we have identified, if you look at the revenue and expense, there is a component of the itemization of our tax revenue that is, I think it's listed out as DIF.
Yes.
Okay, so for district improvement financing. So that's the new growth coming online in the Foundry Street corridor that is attributable to sewer, and that revenue comes in and is used to pay some of those bonds in lieu of higher betterments for the folks in your neighborhood who have those costs. As far as itemizing exactly how much of the growth came from each of those districts, we could for Five Corners. I don't have it offhand, but I'm curious now, so I'm going to find out. But what we do know is that before we built those, all 3 of those sewer districts, right, we were looking at new growth in Easton. So new growth, for anyone who's not, kind of chronically following municipal budgeting, is the only increase to the tax levy that we are allowed to collect without an override. So it's super important. It's new construction, whether that's housing, commercial, industrial. So we have a 2.5% increase, and then the taxable value of new construction adds to that, which is really important. So before those sewer districts were built, and admittedly some of this was in the wake of the 2008 financial collapse, Easton was pretty typically seeing new growth around 500 to 700,000 per year. That grew before the pandemic with the completion of these sewers to nearly 1 million a year, which is a pretty solid improvement. Took a hit in the pandemic, and then this current year it's the highest it's ever been, which is 1.5 million. So nearly 3 times as much as we were sometimes receiving back in the early 2010s. So I will see if there's a way for us to itemize exactly how much of that is directly attributable to those sewer districts, because not all of it is. Some of it's new housing in some other areas. But we've seen a really marked improvement in our ability to grow revenue without overrides, in large part due to those sewers.
Anyone else? This is like white glove service tonight. Can I meet you after? I'm getting my stuff there.
Hi, I'm Sue Arkashevsky, 4 Susan Road. Coming here was really interesting. You mentioned some people's smaller items like the town pool. Well, the smaller item that really got me thinking about everything was when I found out that the contract between the Easton schools and the NRT at Sheep Pasture was in jeopardy. Something, as a past president of the NRT for over 50 years, we've thought of all of our students, anticipating and appreciating all the STEM collaboration that's gone on K through 5 for all these years. We sort of took it for granted, maybe, that we have this wonderful source of teaching. And when I saw that that was in jeopardy, I realized how deep the cuts were going. So I'm here to find out what I can do. And I wondered, is there any lesson that we could know to help the override with what we saw in the town of Milton? That override has passed. Is there any lesson that we could learn that if I wanted to help this override?
I think that's an excellent question. First, I have to ask, I think cows are making their way back to the sheep pasture. Is that true? Excellent. So we've been without, and my kids have always been wondering who will be coming in next. So appreciate that. I also will say that it is one of the items that were identified specifically to ensure we sought to add back if an override is approved. So I think we all value it, whether we're residents, parents, school superintendents, school leadership. So thank you so much for the question. You brought up a great point, and I somehow in all the words that I used didn't cover it. But in the last several months, Milton, Harvard, Winchendon, Chilmont, I think it is, and West Tisbury all passed overrides. Those are all smaller towns facing very similar challenges like we are. The good news is, actually, we were approached, I don't think the PASE Committee necessarily knows all this, but by a couple other communities who asked us how we were formed, why we did what we did, and they wanted to use us as a model for what they were trying to get their town to engage on. I don't specifically have any learnings from Milton. I don't know their situation specifically. I will say, I think our residents and our town leadership were incredibly prescient last year when they formed the PACE Committee and gave us 9 months to try to look at this incredibly difficult, complex, and highly impactful problem. I think a lot of people, like they normally do, and maybe we as residents don't hear this often, but they look at our town leadership for how do we do things. PFAS in your water, they looked at us because we led that charge ourselves, and our residents supported that. And our town administrator is the only town administrator or city mayor to be on the state committee to help the entire state understand how to deal with this issue that we all face. So once again, I would just give our leadership credit and our residents credit for leading and creating a committee like this that has invested, honestly, over 1,000 hours combined looking at this problem.
And may I add something,
Please.
Tom? I think in respect to what residents can do, and I'm a resident as well, as I mentioned, is, as Tom's saying, educate your neighbors, educate your friends, talk to people informally. Sharing information with a friend is so much less controversial than other places that they can hear it. And please make sure that you're getting folks to come both on the 19th to town meeting and on June 10th to that ballot. It's really important. The last time that we did not have an override, it passed at town meeting and then did not get support at the election. And so we can't let that happen either. We've got to really stay vigilant. But I really appreciate your question, because I think conversations are beginning to happen in town, and we need to be the catalyst of those conversations.
Can I just add one thing since I have the microphone? If you could only look at one thing and you only had a short amount of time to do it, I'd recommend going to the PACE website and looking at the frequently asked questions, because it gives you a high-level overview of the most commonly asked questions, and then you can drill down to see all of the data that supports that, and it's really easy to read.
Good call. Any other questions or comments? 8 o'clock's like the witching hour. I know that we had put in a short period of time afterwards for us to regroup in the outer forum. I would just ask, if you have questions, try to connect with the experts. I went way over, so I would probably ask you to help me out and be thoughtful of their time. But honestly, they have been through all of these meetings. And if you have friends who say, I didn't know, how come nobody tells me? Just know this is the third open house. We have been to coffee hours in the morning, library sessions, and I say we loosely, all of our committee members, whether it's giving a presentation at the Y, whether it's going to the senior center at Frothingham Hall. We are trying to get the word out, so we would just ask you to do the same. Please continue to help us, and let's educate and help our community have a good conversation on May 19th. So thank you, and thank you so much for the presenters tonight as well.